Hi, I'm Sandy Ray, founder of Sandra E. Ray CPA, where we alleviate financial headaches so that you can create a bigger impact. Today, I want to talk to you about what grantors are wanting to see on your Form 990. Grantors are using your 990 when considering your grant application. But what are they looking for, and how can you use your 990 to get those grant funds? As we know, grantors have limited resources just like we do. So when making award decisions, grantors are comparing nonprofit organizations using many criteria. First and foremost, they're looking at, does the nonprofit organization have a mission compatible with themselves? And then does the nonprofit demonstrate sustainability through their governance and their financial strength? So to convey these qualities on your 990, there are several things that we can do. First and foremost has to do with providing information about our mission and our program service accomplishments. We can use the 990 to tell your story. Specifically, part 1 is a summary. This is where you get to describe your organization, its activities, and the population that you serve. Part 3 is our program service accomplishments. This is where you get to highlight those important accomplishments and provide all kinds of detail, like how many clients did you serve? How many events did you host? What was the impact on your community? And you can provide very detailed statistics on this. And then finally, Schedule O is where we get to expand on any explanation on the Form 990, and you have unlimited space. So use this. You can really describe what you're doing and the impact that you're providing. The second thing that grantors look for is our governance structure, our policies, and our compliance. And we can demonstrate that on our Form 990 by providing transparency regarding our governance. So if we have any dealings with board members or related parties, we have an opportunity to fully explain what those transactions are and why the board made those decisions. Obviously, those decisions are going to be in the best interest of the organization, but let's list the criteria, the reasons why we decided that this is in the best interest of the organization. And make sure you put in there that that affected board member was not part of that decision. The other thing we want to do is we want to show that we have the necessary checks and balances in place. We do that by having those policies and procedures in place that are listed. We want to be able to say, yes, check, we have a written retention policy. Yes, we have a conflict of interest policy. And we are annually asking the board to review that and report any conflicts. Another transparency item is executive compensation. How did the board determine that was reasonable? Specifically list out those steps that you took. You know, did you go to some benchmarking site? Did you hire an expert? What did you do to determine that executive compensation was reasonable? Finally, grantors are looking at the health of our organization. They're going to do a statistical comparison of our organization's finances to other organizations. And if our ratios are too high or too low, we may not be getting those awards. So you want to make sure that you're in compliance with GAAP on your accounting method basis. So whether you're cash, accrual, or hybrid, you want to make sure that you're following those rules when reporting information. The other thing that we really want to demonstrate as much as possible is diversification of our revenue source. That shows financial strength of our organization. So we want to fill out that statement of revenue using as many of those lines as we possibly can. And if we don't have a strong revenue diversification, that's probably something we can write into the grant narrative application and explain that this is part of why we need these grants to diversify our revenue stream. They're going to be looking at how we allocate our expenses, not only what percentage of our expenses are allocated to compensation for our staff, but how we allocate all of our expenses between program, administrative, and fundraising. And are those reasonable in comparison to other organizations that are like us? Another financial strength indicator is the ratio of assets to our debt. Do we have too much debt? That's going to be an indicator for the grantors. Do we have a reserve to absorb cash flow fluctuations? Those kinds of things. They're going to be looking at that. And you want to make sure that you understand on the 990 what information goes on what line when it comes to assets, liabilities, income and expenditures, and even specific things like our fundraising, Schedule G for our fundraising, what goes on each line, so that we are comparable, so that we don't look like one of those outliers. Some tricky things are professional fees. Many of the professional fees go on line 11. So if you're looking at paying someone to do your social media, that person goes on line 11 for professional fees and not line 12 for advertising. Another thing that I wanted to mention is line 24, which is our other expenses, cannot exceed or should not exceed 10% of our total expenses. So if a grantor sees that we have more than 10% on that line item, they have a pretty good understanding that we don't understand how that 990 is supposed to be filled out. And then another tricky thing that I wanted to mention is our board compensation on Part 7. That compensation needs to match what was reported on the W-2 for that executive or officer or board member, especially if you're a fiscal year end. That may not match what you're putting on your statement of expenses because of the time period difference. So to summarize, our 990s serve a dual purpose. Obviously, we have compliance rules with the IRS so that we can maintain our tax-exempt status. But more than that, it's a marketing and fundraising tool for us. Grantors are looking at your 990 and making their decisions about whether or not to fund your organization based on it. So we recommend that you provide complete and concise description of your organization and your program service accomplishments. Include statistical data, very detailed data sometimes, such as how many clients were served. Don't use jargon or acronyms. You want to make sure anyone who's reading this will understand it, that they don't have to necessarily understand the jargon for your organization or your industry. Demonstrate that you have checks and balances in place by having all of those policies and procedures and being able to say yes, that we have them in writing and that we're following them. And make sure that you understand what information goes on what lines for the financial information. So when we're being compared statistically to other organizations, we're not one of those outliers that's going to be disregarded by the grantor. I hope this was helpful for you. And I want to thank you for joining me today. Remember, creating a bigger impact starts with stopping the nonsense. If you're dealing with nonsense in your nonprofit organization, we'd love to help you cut through the noise.